the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
I like this. This is from a potential convert, so I don't have a name. The email address is gobbledygook to make sure that I would not have any way of knowing the name. That's okay. I don't mind. From California, and the subject line is, why does it matter? And here's the email from a potential convert. Why does it matter to our salvation if Mary was immaculately conceived, ever virgin, or assumed into heaven? Well, the simple answer, there are a lot of things one could say, new or potential convert, but the simplest way I could put it would be, it matters if God deigned to reveal it. If God deigned to reveal to us something that is true, then that's the fundamental reason why it's important, and really for no other reason. Now, the Lord did not reveal to us, now he, of course, was seen by those who were alive at that time and place when he was on earth in his public ministry, etc. But God did not divinely reveal to the rest of us what color Jesus's eyes were. And I think the reason is there was no need for it. There was nothing about his eye color that would have made a difference one way or the other in terms of salvation history. And in the same way, there are countless other things. In fact, in John's gospel, it tells us that there were many things that Jesus said and did that have not been recorded in Scripture. And the reason that they weren't recorded in Scripture, I presume, is not because what Jesus said and did was not important, but what was necessary to be revealed for us was revealed, both in Scripture and in Apostolic Tradition. So back to your very succinct question, I mean, what does it really matter? And does it really matter to our salvation if the Blessed Virgin Mary was immaculately conceived, ever virgin, and assumed into heaven? It matters for the reason that God did reveal these things, and we see implicit references to these three things in Scripture, but we also see explicit testimony to these things in Apostolic Tradition. And I don't know what background you're thinking of converting to the Catholic faith from, whether it's Protestant or maybe a non-Christian religion, I don't know. But in the New Testament, for example, the Bible reminds us not to go by the Bible alone. In, for example, 2 Thessalonians 2:15, where St. Paul says that we are to stand firm and hold fast to the traditions we received from the apostles, either through an oral statement or through a letter of ours, he says. So there's a clear standing command to go by the written word as well as the spoken word, the extra-biblical teachings, the revelations, one of which, by the way, when you're thinking about it, is the canon of Scripture. If you're thinking like, well, what are these extra-biblical teachings? One fundamental example would be the canon of Scripture. Which books are the inspired books that belong in the canon of the New Testament? Well, the New Testament doesn't anywhere tell us what those books are. And even if it did, that would pose a conundrum, logically speaking. But it doesn't tell us in the New Testament what the table of contents is, so to speak, in the New Testament. That is divine revelation that comes from God, as St. Paul says in 2 Timothy 3, verse 16, rather. All Scripture is inspired by God. And so it's not the church that inspires the Scripture, but God does. But he revealed it not in the Scriptures, but through the church. That's an example of apostolic tradition. So the other side of this coin is, first of all, it's important because God revealed it and it was preserved in the church. But here's another reason, is that if we would say, well, I don't accept this teaching or I don't believe this teaching, then you and I would then be the arbiters of the gospel. You and I would then be the arbiters of what do we think is sufficient. What do we think is appropriate? What are the aspects of the gospel that we like? And then we pick and choose. And Jesus didn't arrange things that way. In Matthew 28, in the Great Commission, he told his apostles to go into the whole world and make disciples of all nations. He says, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. So the church in her body of teachings, which includes Mary's perpetual virginity, for example, and her immaculate conception, etc., this is part of the gospel. And the church has been teaching this. And so, as Jesus says in Luke 10:16 to the apostles, He who listens to you listens to me. He who rejects you rejects me. So this is that other side of the coin. If we were to do that and say, yeah, I don't really think that's important, therefore I'm going to draw a red line through that, I'm not going to bother with that, well, then we are not listening to Jesus, because these are things that his church, beginning with the apostles, these are things that are part of the gospel, and the church has the obligation to teach all around the world, everybody. So we don't want to reject something that's divinely revealed. I could say a lot more, but I think those two aspects, really both sides of the same coin, if you ask me, are sufficient. Now, if you're looking for well, how do you explain and defend these teachings? I mean, there's a lot there. I would recommend a book. If you're journeying and you're thinking about these things, I would recommend actually two books. One is a little book. It's called Refuting the Attack on Mary, and that's by a pseudonym. It was a priest who wrote the book, but the pseudonym is Father Matteo, Refuting the Attack on Mary. And he takes up all these different questions. But a longer and more comprehensive book on the topic is by Tim Staples. It's called Behold Your Mother. It's an excellent book, and it focuses on these Marian dogmas. So her Immaculate Conception, the virgin birth, her perpetual virginity, and her bodily assumption. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I appreciate you taking time to write to me. And please keep listening.
This entire episode of the Patrick Madrid Show is on the Relevant Radio app. The Relevant Radio app is completely free and updated daily with fresh articles, podcasts, and prayers. Don't delay. Download the app today. And thanks for listening.